Welcome back. You are still watching Morning Live. Now, Tuesday was the deadline for bidders to express their interest in hosting a South Africa One Grand Prix. In December 2024, the Minister of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie, announced a team that would form South Africa's Formula One bid steering committee for the return of the international motor racing event, which was last held in 1993 out at Kyalami, and which was won by Prost in a Williams. This morning, we are joined by a member of that steering committee, and that is Motorsport CEO, Mr. Maharaj. Vic, a very good morning to you. Always a pleasure speaking to you right here on Sports on Live.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me, and obviously the exciting times with the bid steering committee's deadline on the 18th of this passing. So we're quite excited for the process as it's going to unfold before us.
And we are certainly looking excited to the process unfolding before us. But Vic, perhaps you can tell us a little more about the bids that have been received. How many bids have been submitted? Where are they coming from? Are you able to give us more details on that?
Unfortunately, I can't give you specific details, but suffice to say that we have received bids. The bid steering committee effectively going to go through them in the next few days. We will obviously do that in a transparent manner that all of South Africa can see our progress and the decisions that we make. From my understanding is that we have a self-imposed deadline by the end of April to go through these bids and report as to who we see is the successful bidder to go on to the next stage of the process.
All right. Well, we'll wait for you to update us in due course once you are able to give us more information on those bids. But perhaps we can speak on the challenges that come with the different tracks that we could possibly have. You look at a street circuit, which for many people say it's not as exciting because qualifying almost lets you know who the winner is going to be. And then you have a Kyalami, which almost needs an entire cosmetic upgrade to actually satisfy those Formula One requirements.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting challenge faced with people who decide to have registered their bids with us. The question really is in terms of facilities and where you decide you want to essentially pitch your prospective bid. So obviously, when we know that Kyalami in Midrand is probably most facility ready in terms of hosting a Grand Prix, but it is Grade 2 FIA approved track. To host a Grand Prix, you need to be a Grade 1 FIA approved track, and there's quite a process involved in from a time scale and from a time frame. You're probably looking about a year to get Kyalami ready. The Kyalami management have essentially decided that they are going to go to Grade 1 or apply for Grade 1 certification regardless of the outcome of the bids. So they are pressing. In terms of a street circuit, you're 100% correct. There are varying types of street circuits. If the street circuit layout is not conducive to good racing, then yes, a qualifying session essentially determines the outcome of the race. However, there are very interesting street circuit layouts like the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, which is fantastic. There are opportunities to overtake. There have been talks of various other, can we say, cities in South Africa that probably could host a Grand Prix from a street circuit. However, from a street circuit perspective, the cost implications is massive. The logistics implications is huge. Generally, the preference would be to a permanent circuit. Let's see what the bids show us. Let's see what the bids come up. Maybe there's a compelling case where we actually can't down a street circuit initiative.
Indeed. And perhaps, Vic, we can then get into the discussion around having seen countries leave Formula One. You look at India, then you see a Germany that left one and came back. From a country point of view, it seems like it just takes a lot from the country itself as well as its citizens to make a Formula One race work. How do you, country from a financial point of view, make it happen? How would you say financially it makes sense to have a Formula One race?
I think if you look at the previous countries that were on the calendar and have left the calendar, Formula One, it was a very different industry at that stage. It was almost a closed shop, a niche type. It has now gone mainstream with the Drive to Survive. It really caught the imagination of the greater public. So it is a worldwide accepted sport. It's undertaking. A lot of people say, and I always use this analogy where it's almost the equivalent of hosting a FIFA World Cup. every 2 weeks, the magnitude of this particular event. So the one thing you can be sure of is you're going to sell the event out. In previous years, like in India, etc., you would always see the grandstands having empty spaces. Nowadays, if you look at a Grand Prix, there's not one empty space. Everyone is there. The fans are there. And in terms of that, it gives the promoters and organizers a bit of a commercial guarantee that they can possibly make this race break even at the very least. Regardless of that, it still needs a country initiative. It needs the entire country to be behind it. So the Minister of Sport has basically said that it is his passion and his importance to get a Grand Prix into South Africa. And we are sure that the South African government will support this initiative as well.
And Vic, would you say that in terms of just seeing a profitability point of view, one would almost need to say have about 10-year contract before you can see those profits?
Yeah, I think the Miami Grand Prix is the case in point. You know, Miami came on the circuit and was a massively successful Grand Prix. However, the promoters of that Grand Prix said that the break-even or profit-making point is in year 5. So, yes, I think the minister has also said quite categorically he's not looking for a 1-year race or a 2-year race. We're looking at 5 to 10 years. So I think if the bid is compelling enough and we make in terms of support of the entire country and we take it to Formula One, we take it to the FIA, and if they can, I'm confident that we can get a 5 or 10-year deal, and therefore almost promote the promoter who is successful can get a commercially viable bid himself as well.
Vic, I just want to backtrack a little bit, and apologies for that. I know you touched a little bit on the upgrades that would be required of how much those costs would be to ready for a Formula One race. Just a guesstimate.
Look, it would be very difficult. Obviously, this is hearsay and we don't have the exact numbers. You're probably looking at between 75 and 100 million rands, more or less, for Kyalami to get into a state of readiness for a Formula One Grand Prix. Obviously, there's a whole process to go through. They've got to obviously make application to the FIA, the FIA safety department, and the circuits department will go through the application, come back with suggestions to Kyalami. It's an iterative process back and forth, probably in the making, and let's just use about 100 million rand, more or less.
All right, thank you so much, Vic, for that update that you've given us in terms of what that bid process is looking like, the steering committee, and just what we need from a South African point of view to get ready. Perhaps we can move to issues on track. What did you make of not so great start to the season? No one actually catch the McLarens? I think that's the question everyone is asking themselves.
Absolutely. So I think the Australian Grand Prix was a slight misnomer for Ferrari. A lot of the guys, and myself included, expected Ferrari to be particularly strong come the start of the season. However, they had a bit of issues from what we understand with ride height. They had to lift the ride height of the car, and these Formula One cars are sensitive to every millimeter change in ride height. If you raise it too much and you go out of the spot of the car, the aerodynamic downforce lessens, and as a result, the drivers are fighting the car. I think you heard conversations between Lewis and his engineer. It sounded like they were at sea and couldn't find these terms of getting maximum performance out of the car. Coming back to this weekend's Grand Prix, it's a more traditional circuit. The circuit has been resurfaced. If you watch Free Practice 1 this morning, the cars are seconds faster than previous years. They're talking of breaking the outright lap record, which Sebastian Vettel held in a Ferrari, weirdly enough. So Ferraris look to be there or thereabout in the mix. Aaron of Lando Norris was fastest this morning. So remember, there's a technical direct FIA just released in terms of making the flexible aerodynamics of the rear wings more rigid and more stringent. So we're not quite sure who that's going to affect. And also, just to throw another thing into the mix, it is a sprint weekend for the first time this year. So the teams only had this 1 hour practice session to sort their cars out, get into sprint qualifying now in about an hour's time. So it does look, if you look at the running order, it looks like Ferrari v McLaren at this stage. Verstappen was midfield. He aborted his fastest lap. So we're not quite sure he fits into the mix. But I'm hoping that there'll be a bit more of a race and that the rest of the teams can take the fight to McLaren. But I still think McLaren would be favourites for the weekend.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, ladies and gentlemen. That is Motorsport CEO Vic Maharaj, just speaking all things motorsport, Formula One, the bids that we've seen coming through for South Africa. Not able to give us too much details on those bids at the moment, but we will keep you updated as the story unfolds.